Hi guys, Chris here, and today I'm doing a video review on the BMW i3. Now you might be wondering straight away, why on earth am I doing a review on a 2013 model? Well, simply put, the price for used EVs has significantly dropped, and in this case the 2013 model can now be found for between £10,000 to £12,000, which makes it a lot more affordable for your average Joe like myself. In this respect, I wanted to see if the used EV is worth it in the modern day. So let's get into it before the rain actually drops. So I had to come in because it was actually raining, but it's perfect because I want to talk a little bit about the interior. Now, the actual finish of this particular i3 looks really nice. You've got the blue lines around the exterior of the vehicle and the interior of the vehicle, giving it that i look. Obviously, it's an electric vehicle, so BMW want to differentiate the vehicle over other of their line. However, the i3 is pretty unique. When it comes to design from the exterior and even the interior, it's somewhat subjective. Personally, I really like the look of it, and to me, when the car came out, it kind of defied what an electric vehicle could look like. And a lot of manufacturers have adopted a lot better designs now, where to the point that some electric vehicles actually stand out over your regular petrol or diesel-led engines. Let's talk about the interior. Now, the interior is actually quite spacious. There's a lot of space. In terms of the back, you'll be able to see that there is an ample amount of space when it comes to putting in luggage. I was able to fit in one large luggage very easily, and as soon as I put down the seats, the rear seats that is, which was very convenient and very easy to do. It took very little effort to do so. I could fit in even more, to the point where if it was two of us traveling on a long distance flight, I wouldn't have any problem of fitting in all my luggage. Now, as for the driver, you do also get plenty of space. I'm around 6 foot and I've got plenty of space in terms of headroom at the top, and in terms of my legs, again, plenty of space. Now, I do like to drive a little bit closer to the wheel, simply because I feel like I'm at more control rather than being a laid back, lean back terror squad type of driver. In this case, I'm very much comfortable in driving this vehicle. I don't feel cramped at all, and in terms of legroom, I've got plenty of it. In terms of the interior, you'll be able to see there is plenty of space for you to put in your drinks, to put in stuff that you might have, and there's plenty of compartments throughout the car which actually allow you to store stuff, which is somewhat surprising for a super hatchback, or whatever they call it, a super mini hatchbacker. It is really, in terms of its space, I'm very much impressed. I was expecting a car that was a lot more cramped, comparing it to, for example, the BMW i8, which is a completely different league of vehicle, but that one was very much limited in terms of the amount of space you got. It's not the case with the BMW i3, and there's space at the front as well, or the frunk, to put in some of your belongings that wouldn't be a problem when it comes to weather. In that, what I mean is that the front isn't sort of protected, so rain, wind, debris can get into that little compartment. So you wouldn't want to store in, let's say, an expensive bag. However, if you had some charging cables, for example, you'll probably want to put them at the front so that you free up some space at the back or inside the vehicle. Now, in terms of the instrument cluster, which is in front of me as a driver, or as we're in the UK, it's a right-hand drive. On the left-hand side of me, I've got a set of instruments. Now, I like the fact there is physical buttons here. I can just play around with them. It's very easy to do. I would have liked the placement of the volume knob to be a little bit closer to my driver wheel, simply because that's the one I'd be probably accessing the most. Likewise with the temperature control, I feel that I have to kind of reach for them. And as I said before, I'm around 6 foot, your average type of guy in terms of reach. So if someone has shorter arms or is just naturally less tall, then you'll find it to be a little bit of a reach to go all the way on the left hand side. So in terms of the display that's in front of me, what you'll find is that it's not a touchscreen display, and that wasn't an option in 2013. I do understand that the fact that in 2013 there are very few touchscreen displays, or at least it was kind of starting out for the first time, and manufacturers were just adopting a more interactive display. I don't really blame BMW in this respect because it's an older vehicle. Here I do actually find that the actual display is very nice in terms of its colors. It's very easy to see, and in terms of the information it provides and the settings, it's really well laid out. In fact, at the bottom over here there is a little control pod, and the control pod is actually touch sensitive. Touch sensitive by that, if you want to do let's say go and navigate somewhere, what you'll find is that it's quite easy to input your destination, because this little pad over here accepts not only voice input but also touch input. So if I were to put V, it will say V and then will register the actual touchscreen input. So I find that really nice to see, and it's actually very responsive, meaning address inputs are really good. Now in terms of navigation, I would have liked to see CarPlay or Android Auto included. Unfortunately, what I understand is that CarPlay is an option in the 2013 model. Which, again, at the time, I do understand that was the case. I hope that later models then have adopted that. Unfortunately, I can't comment on that because I haven't driven the 2019 model. In other news, what I would say is that in terms of the dashboard that you get in front of you, it's very small, which does mean that it's nice in terms of aesthetics, but if you do want to mount your phone, you'll find that it's a little bit low down. And also on top of that, it does take a lot of the space, which means that your controls over here are less accessible. It does seem a little bit of a trivial aspect, but for me, for someone who uses Google Maps all the time when it comes to navigating or when it comes to listening to my music, I do find it a little bit awkward. As for charging your phones, you can, or your phones or your cameras or whatever have you, you've got a port underneath the instrument cluster, and you've also got a port over here by the center console. Therefore, you've got two sort of charging ports available, which is great because you can charge your phone and you can also charge your passenger's phone at the same time. So as long as you've got two cigarette lighters. There's also USB input and auxiliary input as well, which is also great to see. In terms of water bottle space, and this might seem very obvious, but there is plenty of space on the right hand side. I've got a Chili 750 milliliter bottle over here, and you've got some space at the front as well, and also your passenger will have the same. Inside of the instrument cluster, there's also a little cup holder space as well, where you can throw in change, for example, or in fact remove it and place a cup if you so wish. So in terms of space and in terms of comfort, I have no issues whatsoever. I'm actually really impressed with what BMW achieved in 2013. Creating a small vehicle, but yet it has plenty of space and doesn't feel cramped in any way, even though from the exterior it looks like a pretty cramped car. Speaking about the exterior, I want to talk about the actual doors, because they do open up in the suicide doors function. And the reason behind this is because there's no pillar which separates the front seat from the rear seats. Now what this means is that it's quite easy to come in and out of the vehicle. You just have to just pop yourself in and mind your head at least at the top over here so you don't hit it. And then equally, getting out is extremely easy. This does mean there is a few complications with this design, is the fact that the rear doors cannot be made open without the front doors opening. So therefore, if you've got passengers at the back which really want to quickly pop out, they won't be able to because they'll have to open both doors. And equally, you can't shut the front door without the rear door being attached. It just stays there kind of in midair, wanting to be closed with its other half. As I said before, in terms of the front, there's plenty of space, but I just thought to show you, again, I am just under 6 foot and I've got plenty of space. I've got about over a hand worth of space at the top, and at the rear I've got about 4 fingers worth as well. So therefore it does allow for plenty of space, as I said before, but I just wanted to show you this as to how it actually looks like, and also talk a little about the door design. So now we're going to do a bit of driving, and first of all, what I wanted to show you is how quick it is to actually go and drive the car from zero. From unlocking the car, simply put, the slowest thing that took me was actually putting on my seatbelt. With petrol cars or diesel cars, there's always that time of switching on the ignition and powering it on, and of course modern cars now are a little bit faster, or even the hybrids are faster. However, this electric car was a very quick, easy sit and go type of vehicle, which I really liked. In terms of the instrument cluster, and specifically how you actually operate the car, on the right hand side there's sort of a gear selector, and the gear selector is very intuitive and allows you to quickly switch between drive, neutral and reverse. You can also go into park, or even engage the parking brake as well if you so wish, and of course that is electronic, as you might expect. So now we're going to do a bit of driving, and what I'd like to say is that there's 2 modes for this car. There's the range extender mode, as I mentioned before, which essentially has the small little 600 odd cc engine working in the background. Now in that respect, the little engine in the background is a little bit noticeable. You can hear it in the back. It just sounds like a little mini petrol engine in the background. But of course, you don't have to use the petrol variant of it. You can also use the full electric mode. And in full electric mode, it's absolutely quiet. If anything, the loudest thing that you actually hear is the road noise. And the road noise comes based off the actual wheels. Now, the wheels are very thin and very small and quite large as well. They're about 19-inch alloys which are on there, which means that you do hear a bit of the road noise. It's not over to the point that if I compare it to, for example, a modern day Mercedes A-Class, I would say that this car is a little bit quieter. For a small sized cabin, it actually does really well. Now, in terms of driving capabilities, due to its wheelbase and in terms of how the actual car operates, it's actually very easy to maneuver in small streets. What you'll find is that over here is where this car kind of excels. You've got that small, nimble feature of it, and you can just maneuver in and out of small roads. And this also applies to parking. So, for example, if you do want to park the car in a tight space, this is very much a very small sized car, making it easy to park. It's not as small as, let's say, a smart car, but it's a little bit smaller than I would say than your average VW Golf, which most people will be able to kind of reference. Now, what I do quite like about the car, and what it does take a little while to kind of get used to, is the regenerative braking methods that it uses. Essentially, the way it works is that when you take your foot off the accelerator, you let go, and then it starts braking automatically. So you pretty much never have to use the brake pedal. Of course, the brake pedal is useful if you're going down a hill, for example, or if you do want to make an emergency stop. But what I would encourage you guys to do is, if you do own this vehicle, is to actually just lift your foot off and somewhat kind of coast. And it does take a little bit of getting used to, because coming from a petrol engine, what I found is that normally I would engine brake, so therefore downshift and let the car kind of slow down on its own and not use the actual brakes itself. Of course, again, if I have to, I would. And then what I did also find is that I would not really be able to coast with this car. I couldn't just accelerate to, let's say, I don't know, if I'm in a 70-mile-per-hour zone and it kind of slows down to 40 miles because there's traffic or whatever, I can't just downshift. There is no such thing as downshifting, because it's all using one gear. So there is no gearbox, so to speak. It's just a single speed transmission. Now, I'm trying to keep my eyes on the road rather than keep it on you. But what I will say about this car is that for the short time that I've had it for, it's been actually a pleasure to actually drive. Driving around city is what I found was the thing that I found the most fun. It was extremely nimble and allowed me to go in and out streets very quickly. And due to the fact that it uses that electric motor alongside with the hybrid version, at least in this respect with the petrol version, it does mean that you get that instant amount of power straight delivered without you having to wait for that mechanical energy to be converted. It is absolutely sensational to feel. And if you haven't driven an electric car before, it is quite a nice experience. Which does lead me on to my next point. In terms of operational cost, it is pretty cheap. If you think about it, an electric car has less mechanical moving parts, which means over time you do have to spend less money in terms of repairing it. Now, it does, however, mean that there are batteries inside, and as with all smartphones or anything that uses any sort of batteries, you will know that batteries do degrade over time. Now, having done extensive research on the EV market and looking into how much do batteries degrade, it's actually quite astonishing that even after 10 years, or under 10 years, people that have owned Tesla Model S's, for example, they would lose around 9 to 10% of battery degradation. In the grand scheme of things, that's actually not bad. Some people might think of it, oh, there is degradation, I'm going to get less range, less power. Think about it, you'd get the same sort of problems if you're driving a petrol or diesel engine. Now, in terms of refueling as such, which means, in other words, recharging, because we are talking about an electric vehicle over here. In this respect, what I found is that recharging the vehicle is actually quite simple, but can be a little bit complicated when you first look at it. I won't lie, when I first looked at it myself, I'm like, why are there so many different providers? There's all these different types of connectors, whatever have you. What does it all mean, and what do I need to do? In all honesty, what I would do is, if you're buying an electric vehicle, consider the type of charger that you've got on your car and base your charging points based on that. It's almost like choosing a petrol station with the lowest price. It is in its infancy right now, and therefore a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money is being shoved into the electric vehicle market in order to make it a bit more accessible and easier for people. In this respect, you do have to check before you go and just charge. All different providers will provide different sort of pricings, and on top of that, aside the actual pricing of it, you do have to make sure that they have the compatible charger, or that you have a charger or a cable, so to speak, almost like a smartphone, that is compatible with their charger that they have. There is also the possibility of home charging, and is one of the advantages of electric vehicles, which a lot of people kind of overlook simply because they think, oh, well, why would I charge it at home? Well, the reason why you charge it at home is simply because you get a free charge, a cheaper charge overnight, and also you can guarantee your car is at 100% when you set off, something you can't quite do with a petrol or diesel led engine. And yes, of course, don't get me wrong, you could have little canisters at home where you can refuel, but who actually does that? So in other words, it is quite convenient so that you can set off your day with a full charge. And in this case, this BMW i3 had a home charger kit available. It's very easy to use and fits into a 3-pin socket. What I would advise if you are buying an electric car is to actually not rely on the 3-pin sockets, because it's a really slow charge. It's a 3 kilowatt charge to be specific, and instead invest in a home charger. If you do purchase a vehicle, be it used or new in terms of electric, then you will get a government grant which gives you £500 off for a approved home charger. And home chargers, the benefits of them, if you can install them, if you live in a house, or if you've got a management system in your flats that actually allow it, is that you can provide a higher amount of charge, up to 22 kilowatts if I'm not mistaken, in terms of charge, meaning that you can charge up your car in a lot quicker time than you would be able to with a 3-pin cable. So enough about charging, and actually in terms of the talking about the charging, how does the car perform? So as I mentioned before, in terms of city driving, I really enjoyed it. What about the ride comfort? Because that is actually a very important point. Well, the ride is a little bit harder than you'd expect, because those small little wheels are, well, small, and the rims themselves are pretty big. So you do hear a bit of road noise, as I mentioned before, but mainly the biggest thing over here is going over bumps. You do feel the bumps a little bit more. Now, it's not quite your sports car, which will have really stiff suspension, but neither is it, let's say, your VW Golf with very soft suspension, and therefore makes it quite easy and soft to drive. So it's just worth bearing in mind that the ride comfort around the town is comfortable. However, what you will find is that sometimes it can be a little bit stiff as such. Now, what about in terms of raw performance? Well, if I put my foot down, I get instant amount of power, and I must say the car does respond really well. I did mention before about the electrical power and the electric motor, which therefore makes it give instant power when you put your foot down on that accelerator. Now, in a 0 to 60 environment, you're getting it around 7 seconds, which is actually pretty impressive for a car of its size or a car of its class. Now, most cars which are diesel or petrol-led engines will be a lot slower. Now, that's not to say they're not nippy and fun to drive, but when you compare it to this BMW i3, I think you'll find it's quite impressive. However, top speed is limited. Top speed is limited to around 90 odd miles an hour, which does mean that you can't fly past illegally, at least in the UK, or go unlimited in the Autobahn in the US, even in Germany. But other than that, in terms of as your city car, as you can expect, it is actually really fun to drive. And therefore means that if you're going to be driving around the city, you're not going to need a car that actually has a faster top speed than that. 90 miles an hour or a 0 to 60 of around 7 seconds is really impressive. Now, of course, the range is going to be very interesting to some people, and is going to be one of the determining factors where people are wondering, what range would I get from an electric vehicle? Well, electric vehicles have become a lot better over time, and nowadays the range of electric vehicles is a lot better. But here we are reviewing the BMW i3. Well, at least the hybrid variant of it is quoted at around 170 miles, which isn't bad. You've got around a 75 75 miles split between the small tank, the petrol tank that is, and well, the range extender mode of it, and also 75 miles odd with the electric motor. If you go pure electric, at least in the 2013 BMW i3, you will be limited to around 70 to 80 miles, give or take. And in my tests, I found to be relatively accurate. These are all quoted and also standardized by manufacturers, but that's also because they've got regulation. So in terms of range, if you think about it as a city car, it's actually plentiful. 150 miles, you know, I could drive up and down quite a few different places and not have to worry about recharging or refueling. Of course, there is that limitation of recharging. If you're going to get a car like this, it's going to be relatively slow to recharge in comparison to, for example, a Tesla, which charges at a 150 to 250 kilowatt charge, as in its upcoming 250 kilowatt, or the Porsche Taycan, which is a 130 grand car or something. These type of cars will charge a lot slower. So expect a full charge at its fastest quoted charging rate, as in not a home charger, to be at around 6 to 8 hours for a full charge. Again, not bad, because you can do that overnight and never have to worry about recharging, specifically because at this model you get that range extender, which gives you that extra range. Overall, the actual driving experience is fantastic and made for the city and made for smaller roads, tight corners, and made for tighter parking scenarios. This car is actually ideal. But ultimately, is it worth it? So between 10 to 12,000 pounds, you can get yourself a pretty good gasoline or diesel-led engine, used that is, or even new nowadays. Now in this respect, what I found is that yes, these other cars will be providing you a sort of more luxurious feel, be it inside or out. Yes, they will be a little bit different in terms of their performance stats. If anything, they'll probably be better in terms of that, and also they'll give you a better range, but they're not an electric car and therefore won't give you that instant power and won't have that green energy kind of tag behind it. So still at this time, cars are pretty expensive, as in electric cars are expensive. And is it worth 10 to 12,000 pounds? Well, if you're looking for a city car, you want that instant electric feel, and you want to invest into the EV world, then absolutely, I can't see why you wouldn't get the BMW i3. It's been an absolute pleasure to drive this car, and I must say, I wasn't expecting myself to have this much fun driving this car. I was expecting it to be a bit more boring, a bit more dull, loads of limitations, but within less than a couple of hours I was fully accustomed with all the systems within the car, and I was driving away as if it was my daily driver. I'm gonna be sad giving this car back. However, I have thoroughly enjoyed the short car loan, and I would definitely say go out and let me know what you think in the comments below of what you think of electric cars and or cars that are made to be hybrid or have some sort of electric motor within it. Is it something you're going to be investing in? Is it something that you have already invested in? Or is it something that you would absolutely never invest in at all? So let me know in the comments below. I'd be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts. And more than anything, like, comment, subscribe, favorite, share. It always helps the channel grow. Very much appreciate all the support and the love that you guys have given over the years. And hopefully there's going to be a lot more car stuff coming up in the future. All right, guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye-bye.